The information provided is not a substitute for legal and other professional advice where the facts and circumstances warrant. People should always consult their own legal or other professional advisors and discuss the facts and circumstances that apply to their specific circumstances. The information shared on Ask the Landlord is for educational purposes only.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Landlord with our favorite landlord, Albert Dweck. I'm Melissa. I'm one of Albert's producers and a former New York City, Pittsburgh, Lafayette, Louisiana, and Washington, D.C. renter. And together, we're going to ask this landlord some questions. If you want to ask Albert a question, call us. Leave us a voicemail on the Ask the Landlord hotline. That number is 646-580-3015. We would love to hear from you and answer your question on the show. How's it going, Albert?
Going great, Melissa. How you doing?
I'm good. I have a question that has affected me, has affected a lot of my friends, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate and don't know the rules around it. So let's say someone is currently renting and their lease is ending soon and the landlord wants to start showing the unit while they're still there. What is the protocol? How does that work? Tell us your input.
So it's a good question. Obviously, everyone deals with this. Most leases, and you should read this before you sign a lease, obviously. But your lease usually provides for the landlord's ability to enter the apartment and show it with proper notice. Okay. So now, as long as if you're the renter, as long as you're given proper notice and it works for your schedule, the landlord can enter, and it's different in different places and according to your lease. That's something that, you should be aware of. Naturally, look, you want to cooperate with your landlord if you can, and have a good process. At the same time, you want your security deposit back. You want to have a good reference. So you want to have a good relationship with your landlord, but you also, you want to live your life and you don't want to be inconvenienced. So obviously make sure it works for you. One interesting idea that we were presented with, and we actually worked with a company that did this, was they said, okay, Albert, we have this idea, and it was pretty good. So I'll tell you about it. So they said, oh, well, let's say you have a lease, you're a landlord, right? And you have a lease expiring in like 60 to 90 days, right? So we have practice, like we reach out to our residents and we say, okay, listen, your lease is up. What do you want to do? So they have a thing where this company, they said, okay, well, they reach out to the tenants on our behalf. And they said, listen, if you want to renew, do you want to renew? If you want to renew, they send them back to us to talk to. Fine. If they said they were going to move out, okay, then this company would help use the tenant, have the tenant show the unit and pay them. So you understand why that makes sense? So let's just...
Absolutely, because it gives them the freedom and it's on their schedule, essentially.
Yes, but I'm gonna explain like why, and then you understand more. So basically, what happens is, let's say a resident moves out of an apartment, right? So then the landlord has to clean it, paint, whatever they have to do to get it ready. Mm-hmm. So that takes time, and money, right? And so then, let's say, Melissa, you moved out of a place. So then that place is not necessarily showable right away, right? It has to be cleaned up, fixed up, and then it could be shown. So there's time in between. And that time is valuable, right? Let's just say, let's say your $2,000 a month is rent and you moved out, right? And then the next, to get it ready, it's not like he's going to rent it right away. I'm just saying in my example, because at best, they have to clean the place. Let's say they have to paint, whatever. So let's say it takes 2 weeks. So that the landlord then loses $1,000, right? I'm just saying. Then typically the landlord's going to, let's say, put it on the market with a realtor. Okay? And that realtor, let's say, gets paid 1 month's rent, as an example. So now you see already the landlord has to lose $1,000 from the rent. I just want you to understand the number so we could come back to it. Landlord's going to lose $1,000 from the rent for the 2 weeks, right? Then they're going to have to pay a realtor like 1 month's rent to show the place. So that's $3,000 plus the cost of fixing. But let's leave that aside. Okay. So now you're realizing that in a $2,000 apartment, it's like a $3,000 bill for the landlord. So now this company comes and says, well, what if we could minimize the amount of time it was vacant by showing, almost staging, like we talked about in another podcast, is like someone could show how they're living in the apartment to the next person, how they liked it. So there's like a pride of ownership. So this person then could cooperate with the landlord, and realizing that there's that real money there, so cooperating with the landlord, maybe the landlord could pay the tenant some money to avoid having a broker, or having cooperation and having the tenant even show pictures or show the place to somebody. Again, not being maybe there's an opportunity for the resident to make more money by showing the place to the next prospective tenant, minimizing the downtime. So that was the idea behind that. Now, so I just turned something where you said, yes, it's an inconvenience, but it could be something where now you could see like there's an opportunity for a resident to make an offer, say, listen, hey, what if I could show it to the next person? Would you give me a discount or give me some compensation for cooperating? That's possible, I guess.
I wish I knew that 3 years ago, because when we were renting a house in Pittsburgh and they were trying to sell it. It was peak COVID, and I literally didn't want people in my house. So I was showing them. I was like, take your shoes off, please wear a mask. And I was giving them a tour, but I was passionate because I loved the house. So I was a great salesperson because it's
right.
cool.
So I think maybe there's an opportunity there for you to.
I wish I knew.
Yeah. And the idea behind, I guess, what we're speaking here is so that you understand a little bit of the economics on both sides.
Definitely.
And on the one hand, the resident who's leaving, like, doesn't want to be inconvenienced. Or how about being paid for that inconvenience? That would be great. And helping the landlord, understanding that if I can minimize the downtime and if I could minimize the amount they're going to pay to another broker, wouldn't that be great?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So why is there a company that does this? What does the company do?
Well, the company that we had used, I don't think they're in business anymore, I'm sure there are others. This is, we talked about this in other podcasts where, the real estate industry is typically very archaic, not up with the technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was one offer that, people who thought of good ideas were like, oh, if we could contact the people who are living in these places and then, get them to put up pictures and show the place to prospective rent, there's like there's technology kind of a platform that they could create. So that was the idea that they had. I don't think they're in business because of COVID happened in the middle of that,
So the tenant has the right, though, to remain in their unit while they're showing. Is that correct?
Of course, unless the lease says otherwise.
It could. You've seen that?
Yes. I've seen that in the case of student housing, where it was very interesting, where the lease, and we'll talk about this in another podcast, but the lease that we signed was, let's say, till August 31st, right? but we had to vacate August 24th.
That's to avoid all those costs you were just talking about, probably.
Right. So so the landlord could like have a week of free reign while we're paying for it.
Did you get out of, we'll talk about that, but I'm curious if you got out of that one.
No, you know, that's the deal you signed up for, you know?
Yeah.
So, anyway, I'm bringing it up here, for what we discussed is because, you know, your lease has rules
Mm-hmm.
about when and how your landlord can have access. Generally, you know, we advocate here is to communicate and cooperate with each other, you know, to the best we can. Not for either one of us to inconvenience the other, working together to help provide great housing. And I think that's, you know, no one wants people in their house when they don't want. And I think, you know, as a landlord, if you're listening to this, is probably a good idea to offer something to your residents for cooperation, because it's in your best interest. And for residents, I think it's good to, you know, cooperate with your landlord, as long as it's within, you know, the rules of the lease and that you're not extremely inconvenienced, you know. So because you want good references going forward and just good energy, you know. That's
Yeah.
what,
All right. Thank you, Albert. You summed that up perfectly for us here, and we really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
For more episodes, please subscribe to Ask the Landlord on your favorite podcast platform. We'd appreciate it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to watch the show, check out our Ask the Landlord YouTube channel. If you have a question for Albert, feel free to contact him on Instagram at @AskTheLandlord and check out his TikTok at @AskTheLandlord. Bridging the gap between landlords and tenants, this has been Ask the Landlord. Thanks for listening.